Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Well, people frustrated with high grocery prices are now joining a call to boycott Loblaws stores across the country for the whole month of May. Our Reddit group now has 67,000 members. Well, do you plan to join this boycott? Would a boycott be effective? And how are you managing the rise in grocery prices? Later this hour, it is Asian Heritage Month, and we'll talk about how those family-run Chinese restaurants tell the stories of Chinese immigration and settlement in Canada. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Thanks for joining us on CBC Radio 1 and on CBC Television, live streaming as well on the CBC News app, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. You can call us now on our top story. Are you participating in the boycott of the Loblaws stores for the month of May? And how are you managing rising grocery prices? Our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. First, we head to Kamloops, where an historic church in the downtown core caught fire this morning. The building is one of the oldest in Kamloops. It was built just after the Canadian Pacific Railway construction was completed there. And fire crews were called out just before 9 this morning. The CBC's Doug Herbert is live at the site right now. Hi, Doug.
Yes, I'm standing here at 2nd and Seymour, I should say, in front of St. Andrew's on the Square, which is the building where that fire broke out earlier this morning. Fire crews are still on scene, but they say they've knocked it down. They're just checking for some hot spots, but they are still very much evident. The roads have reopened around us, so Kamloops traffic is moving again finally, although there is still a power outage affecting about 209 businesses.
Tell us what happened this morning, Doug.
Well, I had just moved my car after doing our early morning radio show, and I noticed smoke billowing in the air about a half a block from our CBC Kamloops bureau here. And I ran to see what it was, knowing that this historic building is right here. As I came around the corner, I saw fire from behind the building. So I ran down the alley to see what it was, ran into one other fellow there, called 911 because the fire was just billowing from the outside of the building. It was a shopping cart that had been pushed up against some gas lines there, and the fire had already spread inside of this historic church.
Wow. And this church does have a history within Kamloops. What can you tell us about it?
Well, it is the oldest public building in Kamloops at 137 years old. It was built way back, even before Kamloops was incorporated as a city. That happening in 1893. Now, it was all made out of wood because brick construction had yet to begin here in Kamloops. St. Andrew's Presbyterian used it for many years. Then the Pentecostal ministry took it over, and that was led by preacher Phil Ghilardi. And now he later made headlines as a BC cabinet minister with the nickname of Flying Phil. In fact, there is a statue behind me of Flying Phil Ghilardi in the square. That building is now used for weddings. It is city-owned. Most recently, there was a fundraiser, a big book sale inside of it.
Wow. It really has this integrated place within the community. You mentioned you ran into a witness, a bystander. Tell us about that.
Yes, the witness, Daryl Snell, was standing there as I ran up to the building. I asked him, what did you see? He said, literally, we were walking and we saw some smoke. He got on the phone to the fire department. I didn't know that when I phoned them. I guess I was the second phone call in. And yeah, so let's hear what Daryl Snell had to say about what he saw.
It's so horrific. We turned up and there was smoke billowing out of the church. We walked down further to see what was going on. There was a security guard there, but there was a cart that it was on fire that had been pushed up against the church right next to the gas line. Fire was bursting out. It's very sad to see this happen in our city.
And what do you think about the notion of this fire in such a historic building?
It's a disaster. I mean, you can only hope that it's going to be able to be restored, and I guess the damage won't be known until you see inside. But there was a lot of smoke pouring out, and I just hope it can be fixed because it's so iconic to Kamloops.
Now, that was Kamloops' Daryl Snell. His thoughts were shared by many of the people I spoke with who stopped to watch this fire this morning as the fire crews got underway and managed to knock it down.
And what have we heard, officially from the fire department or from the city or owners of the building?
Well, yes, the owners of the building are the city. We haven't heard from them yet, but the fire department is still on scene. I spoke with them recently. They are investigating the cause. Now, they do say it did really appear like it started outside. It suffered fire damage on the back side of the building, up into the attic. A lot of water damage as well because they sprayed a ton of water into that building. We could see it just coming down the stairs of the front of the building. We also just spoke with one of the fire captains on scene, and he said they took pains to get all of the historic stuff out of the building that they could. There was a hallway full of wedding photos because there's been multiple weddings here. They saved as many of those as they could. They've given it to the city. So at this point, I guess we'll have to wait to see how badly the building was damaged and how long it will be before it's put back into service.
Unfortunately, no one was there when it happened that we know of right now. So that's good news right now. Thank you so much, Doug, for this report.
Thank you, Michelle.
That's CBC's Doug Herbert live in Kamloops. 12 minutes after 12 now, 1:12 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today here on CBC. Well, fair or not, Loblaws has become the target of customer anger over high grocery prices. And yesterday was the first day of a month-long customer boycott of its stores and others owned by the company, such as Shoppers Drug Mart, No Frills, City Market, among others. And the CBC's Sarah Galashan asked the organizer of the boycott why they targeted Loblaws. And here's Emily Johnson.
Loblaws out of the big five grocers has the largest market share, and they also operate in a number of places in the country that have food deserts where Loblaw is the only option for a lot of people. And so our community felt that it was not the only problem, but definitely the biggest one.
If that's the only option, are you offering ways in which they might, continue also participate in this protest?
Of course, we encourage folks to reach out to their local member of parliament, and we've actually created a template letter for people to use to help them start that conversation. We also encourage folks to use their opt-in points as much as possible or purchase loss leaders, so those items that draw you into the store with the expectation you're purchasing other items. We also encourage people to reach out to Loblaw customer support, asking them to take our movement seriously, donating time and money to local food banks as you're able to, as well as just sharing our message with your community. You might not be able to boycott, but other folks in your circle may.
That is the organizer of the month-long boycott of Loblaws. That's Emily Johnson. Now, here in Vancouver, the CBC's Karis Hogg asked people on the street what they think of the boycott.
I'm hoping they're going to bring some costs down, or at least pay attention to what people are saying. And if they want loyal customers, they need to create loyalty by creating prices that are reasonable.
And so you were taking part in the Loblaws boycott then?
100%.
I think you could look at the industry as a whole, for sure, and look at it. I mean, no matter what grocery store I've gone to, the prices are quite a bit higher just across the board.
Well, I mean, if I boycott Loblaws or where I'm getting my groceries, where am I going to get the food to put on my table, though? So, I mean, I don't think I like how the pricing is going up, but it's not something that I would be boycotting. At the end of the day, I still got to make sure that my family's fed and I got to keep food on the table. So I don't think it's something that I would partake in necessarily.
I mean, I guess you can speak with your wallet, but at the end of the day, you've got to buy groceries somewhere. And if you're taking out of Loblaws, you're just putting it in Jimmy Patterson's wallet elsewhere. So I don't know if you have much choice.
Some folks on the streets of Vancouver, they're commenting. Well, we're asking you right now on the open line, are you participating in the Loblaws boycott? And do you think such a boycott will be effective? And how are you managing the rise in grocery prices? You can call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. And joining us now for more is Kent Mullenix. He's the director of the Institute for Sustainable Food Systems at Kwantlen Polytechnic University. Hi, Kent. Good afternoon.
Hello, Michelle. Good afternoon.
What do you think of this boycott? How well placed is it?
Well, I think it's timely and is a clear communication from folks about their frustrations with not certainly with the price of food, but perhaps more largely with the economic environment that they have to deal with every day.
We often hear from Galen Weston of the Loblaws company. We've heard from him, speaking in front of the House committee on grocery prices, saying it's not something that we can that we influence. But when people see numbers like what we saw recently, the parent company Loblaw companies announcing $13.58 billion in first quarter revenue, and that's a 4.5% increase from a year earlier. You can imagine people wondering, really, is that really the case? What is your reaction to the kinds of profits and revenue that grocery companies, such a big one, such a large one, such as Loblaws, is making amid people struggling with these high prices?
Well, Michelle, I think that they are pursuing an economic agenda that our economic policy environment allows, and that's pursuit of sheer profit. They enjoy a level of hegemony in the food system that is unprecedented. And they really control the food system to a significant extent. And I think that this is largely the manifestation of policy failure.
What are the failures?
Well, we've allowed concentration to occur in the food system, not just the retail sector, but increasingly in the production sector, the post-production sector, and the retail sector. In Canada, and this is the same in the United States, 4, 5 companies control the majority of the food retail market, and that is referred to as an oligopoly. And if we're going to have free enterprise, free market, you cannot allow oligopolies and monopolies to emerge. They have too much economic power. And but this is since the Reagan-Thatcher era, the enforcement of antitrust laws, those laws that are designed to prevent the formation of oligopolies and monopolies, have been largely ignored. And so we're seeing the result of that in the food system.
Okay, I'd love to ask you more about that, because that's something that the Competition Bureau pointed to last year as well. Let's take some calls now, asking you on the open line, do you plan to participate in the month-long boycott of Loblaws stores? This Reddit group that was started by an organizer, it's now grown to 67,000 people that say they support it anyway, and it'll be interesting to see how many people actually participate in the boycott. Do you plan to do so? Do you think it will be effective? And how are you managing rising grocery prices? I'd love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Chris is joining us from Cranbrook. Hi, Chris.
Hello.
Hi,
thank you for taking my call.
Sure. What do you think of this boycott? Do you plan to join, or?
I don't think it's going to do much good. I really don't. Because, like, one of your first guests, said that in some places they are grocery starved. You only have one place to go. But Cranbrook, you got 3 for sure. And now I heard on CBC that the federal government, well, this was a couple of weeks ago, though, but they're kind of enticing people from abroad. They didn't really name, but there was hints about the U.S. and the U.K. to come into Canada. But I don't really, myself, I don't think it's a good idea.
Oh, okay. Encouraging foreign grocery stores.
Well, no, that's fine. Competition, right? And that was all the big thing about it. But don't you think that these grocery stores that come into Canada are going to get enticed by the money that these guys are, the 5 big ones or whatever, enticed by the money and saying, oh, well, yeah, no, we can do this too.
So it'll be the same thing. It'll be the same kind of...
It'll be the same. I don't think there'd be a big competition.
Okay.
It's like the media service, right? Like your cable and your Wi-Fi and all the rest of it. They all pretty much have the same price. Some people might cheat a little bit, but...
Oh, I see what you're saying, though, in that everyone is going to get, I guess, regardless of bringing in smaller or outside grocery stores, that's not going to necessarily improve prices. Is that right?
I don't really think it is.
Okay. Chris, thank you so much for the call from Cranbrook. Good to hear from you there. Richard is up next at Mill Bay. You take care, Chris. And Richard, hello.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for calling. What do you make of this boycott of Loblaws?
I've been watching it for about the last 6 months on the Reddit file, and I roll my eyes. Loblaws is a very, very good community responsible, in my location, market. We have Loblaws, we have Sobeys, we have Jimmy's, all of Jimmy's stores and the derivatives of them as well. If you can buy an apple at farmers markets, and I was on the board for 20 years.
Of farmers markets?
Absolutely. British Columbia. An apple for $4 a pound, and you can go to a Loblaws store and watch it when you go in the morning, and they're $2.25. They do a price check with Walmart, which you're not including in this discussion, and it goes and it's at $1.25. Immediately, it'll be honored. Do I buy socks at Loblaws? No, because I know how to shop.
Okay.
I buy produce. I buy some canned goods, but no, I'm totally supportive of Loblaws, and anybody who's just looking to be a pain in the tuchus, go ahead.
Well, what do you make of the? So you're saying, you know what, they do honor, price matching.
Yeah.
Okay. And it sounds like you're a comparison shopper as well, Richard.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And don't forget, my mother always said, don't count other people's money. And when Galen Weston makes a statement, I don't care how much money he's made. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
I am buying bananas at 68 cents at Loblaws or 89 cents at a Sobeys or $1.50 at a Whole Foods.
Oh, okay, that's a whole nother conversation, isn't it? And I'm glad you brought up Walmart as well. We'll get into the big box stores as well in this conversation, Richard. Thank you so much. I'll go back to Kent Mullenix, someone there who's he was talking about farmers markets, so they can be pricey, although he was on the board. But I guess before we wrap up here. With you, Kent, what needs to change then about our food systems? You said there needs to be more competition, more enforcement of rules around that. What needs to change regionally? Let's say here in BC.
It's a good question. I'd like to, before answering that question, Michelle, if you'll indulge me, it's interesting that the last caller brought up Walmart. They really dictate much of the terms of the retail sector. And I think people need to understand what's really going on here. The accumulation of wealth and power in the hands of a few private individuals or corporations has become overwhelming. The Walton family, a few people, has more wealth than most nations, and Walmart largely dictates the terms of the whole food retail sector, and this is unacceptable. And we've created an economic environment documented by the French economist Piketty that is allowing for the concentration of the exponential concentration of wealth and power at the same time, and commensurately, it takes wealth away from everyday people. And this is really what the boycott is about. I think it's a statement, and it's really not an issue of whether it's going to bring Loblaws to its knees or not.
No,
it's really people voicing their concern and dissatisfaction with an economic policy environment, an economic strategy that's disenfranchising everyday people and enriching fewer and fewer exponentially. But what I think people need to do is speak out like this.
Okay.
They need to convey their dissatisfaction. They need to convey their concern with this economic strategy. But I also think that they need to, and I'm going to say this, Michelle, they do need to vote with their dollar.
Okay.
They do need to recognize that
I do have to
using their money to create strong, robust local regional economies is what will really enrich their communities and bring the wealth back home and not relegate it to moving to corporate headquarters every day.
Is there a chance, I just have about a minute left here, but is there a chance for a small startup who would like to disrupt the system, or who would like to bring more of that competition and diversity to the market? Is there a chance for them?
Well, I'm sure there is a chance, Michelle, but I don't think it's a big chance. It's right now it's quite niche in Vancouver. There are examples of that. Choice is one of them, where I used to shop until the Pattison Group bought it. But then there's also Green's Market, an independently owned and operated market on Broadway. But the definition of a free market is that potential participants can get into the market easily, and those who want to get out of the market can do so easily. Okay. And that free market simply doesn't exist.
Kent, always good to speak with you. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Michelle. Good to speak with you, too.
You take care. Kent Mullenix, director of the Institute for Sustainable Food Systems at Kwantlen Polytechnic University. And we'll go back to more of your calls on grocery prices. How are you managing? And what are your thoughts on this month-long boycott of Loblaws stores across the country? Do you plan to participate? And can it be effective? We'll go back to more of your calls after the CBC News Update. And here now is Susan McNamee.
Good afternoon. Here is your BC News Update. Homicide investigators say the husband of a woman found dead in a home in Surrey's Newton neighborhood last Friday is now charged with second-degree murder. Hardeep Sidhu was arrested yesterday with assistance from the Canada Border Services Agency. Police are calling her death an isolated incident. Fire investigators in Kamloops are assessing the damage to a historic building in the city's downtown core. A fire was reported shortly before 9 this morning at St. Andrew's Church. It was built just after the completion of the Canadian Pacific Railway in Kamloops. Witnesses reported seeing a burning shopping cart next to the building when fire crews arrived. And police on Vancouver Island say they're investigating 3 assaults within a 24-hour period involving young people attacking adults. Nanaimo RCMP say the assaults occurred Monday and involved bear spray, a metal baton, and in one case, a knife. All 3 victims needed to be treated in hospital for various injuries. RCMP spokesperson Gary O'Brien says 2 teens between 14 and 16 years old have been described in each of the random attacks. Taking a brief look at your BC weather on the south coast, a lovely day, mainly sunny, a high of 16 near the water and up to 19 inland. Tomorrow, a mix of sun and cloud. For the central interior, a mix of sun and cloud, a high of 16. Friday will be mainly sunny, increasing cloudiness in the afternoon, and a high of 16. For the southern interior, mainly sunny. There is the risk of thunderstorms over the ridges late this afternoon. Expect strong winds and a high of 20. Tomorrow, a mix of sun and cloud, gusty winds again. For the Kootenays, a mix of sun and cloud today. There's a 40% chance of showers this afternoon with the risk of a thunderstorm and a high of 17. And up in the Peace, a mainly cloudy day. A high of 15, but you'll get the sun back tomorrow with a high of 16. I'll be back at 1 o'clock with all your latest local, national, and international weather and all the news that's fit to talk about. Now it's back to Michelle Elliott and BC Today.
You're very choosy.
We bring everything in 4.5 minutes. It's amazing sometimes,
right.
Isn't it?
It's a tight timeline. Nice to have you back, Susan.
Nice to see you. You know, you're talking about grocery prices.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about that, looking at the flyers this morning. And, you know, what boggles my mind is how an item can go from maybe it was $4.99 and now it's $7.99.
Right.
Like we can all deal with a couple of cents, and even that's a challenge for many, but up $3? It's almost like, well, why?
Yeah, and it changes week to week, it seems. Like I watch apples a lot, and then I'll change, you know, even though we have our favorites, ambrosia, but sometimes those are the priciest. And then it's like, okay, no, this week our favorites are going to be gala, okay?
Absolutely. I watch the asparagus, you know, and when it's under $4, okay, but it can change like over the course of a day.
Yeah.
So as I just did, it's a head scratcher.
Yeah, asparagus, that's a treat. That's a treat.
It is once in a while now.
They can go up in price. Nice to have you back. Thanks so much.
Nice to see you, Michelle. Bye-bye.
Susan McNamee in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Welcome back. You're with BC Today, and we are talking about grocery prices in light of this month-long boycott of Loblaws stores across the country. It was launched by Emily Johnson, and she said she started a Reddit group that now has 67,000 members of the group, and she says she's targeting Loblaws because out of the 5 big groceries, it has the largest market share. And she says she's actually got a meeting lined up with the CEO of Loblaw. But we're asking you, are you planning to participate? Do you think a boycott can be effective? We heard from Kent Mullenix earlier saying it is a statement. And how are you managing those grocery prices? Just like myself and Susan, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Joanne writes, boycotts are the only way the public can be heard by industry. This is something we used to do in the past before the mass connection with technology, especially social media. Of course it will work. Look at the Me Too movement. Food prices affect everyone, and grocery chains making unjustifiable profits need to stop. With a well-connected society, this should create fear in the boardroom. Now, for those people who have to shop at Loblaws, that can still hurt the company. Don't buy any fresh products, dairy, produce, or meats and fish. This is the most expensive loss for a grocery chain. Sheena writes, the culture of greed and glorification of the shareholders, which started in the ugly 80s, have got to be stamped out. Taxing excessive profits is the only way I can think to do this. Hopefully, industry would rather charge less than pay more taxes. And Jessica writes, I am participating in the boycott, not only because of prices, but because of how hostile Loblaws is to its customers. They have created a very inhospitable shopping experience with their anti-theft initiatives, etc. I think Jessica might be referring to things like before you leave, if you're using the self-checkouts and things like that. Ultimately, I don't think it will work on prices because we have a monopoly in Canada, but it will sure send a message. I am managing high grocery prices by paying close attention to flyers and trying not to remember grocery prices in the past. Yes, that's right. Comparison shopping with the past may not be the best for morale. Jessica, thanks so much. Let's go to another call here. Larissa is joining us from Vernon. Hi, Larissa.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Sure. What do you think of this boycott?
Yeah, I think that probably the saying, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, applies here. Of course, we know that this type of action is not alone going to fix this immense problem that we have with groceries in Canada, but it's something that lots of people can do. And it is something that the corporate branch will hopefully pay attention to.
Are you participating?
Yeah, I actually don't really shop much at Loblaws stores to begin with. I make the trek out to Costco, which is about an hour from where I live, and that's not even necessarily for cost savings, but it's just a more enjoyable experience, and I think that their practices and how they treat and pay their employees are quite a bit better than most of the other hegemonies in our market.
And so that makes a difference to you in terms of what you've heard about employees as well. What did you make of what Kent Mullenix had to say with regard to the way that the oligopoly has grown and what needs to be done?
Yeah, I think that this is an issue that plagues Canadians not only in the grocery sector, but in multiple sectors, in telecom and in flights, et cetera, and it's an overall failure of our government to adequately protect consumers and bring in competition. And there's lots of easy fixes that could be taken by all levels of government to help increase food security and competition in the market.
Like what? What would be an easy? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, oh, sorry. I had that one ready. One example that I think everyone could take action on today, for example, is write a letter to your local city council and tell them that you would like to be allowed to have backyard chickens. You can look at the price of eggs and poultry, but eggs in particular, and see how it's just skyrocketed, likely to only go higher as there's a huge avian flu epidemic right now. And, you know, there's not really any reason why we're not allowed backyard chickens. They don't take that much room. They're great for reducing food waste. And it's a great first step for having people take more control and feel more empowered to actually control some of their food supply.
And there's a number of municipalities in BC that do allow for them, right?
Yeah, there are. There are.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, and that's also a great argument. They don't have to redraw the wheel. They can just look at how those municipalities have implemented it and adopt similar practices. But I think kudos to everyone who's putting in the effort to change their shopping habits this month. And, you know, don't be convinced that one small action cannot lead to collective action, because it can. And yeah.
Larissa, thank you so much. Great to hear from you in Vernon.
Thank you.
Take care. Daniel is next in Vancouver now. Hi, Daniel.
Hi there.
Hi. What do you think of this boycott?
Well, I'm participating. I'm in a privileged position of being easily able to do so. I live near Commercial Drive in Vancouver, and there are lots of shops up all and down the drive. It'll take me more time than just going to one supermarket, but it's worth it. A lot of people don't have that luxury. So, yes, I am participating in the boycott. I'd like to raise a point very closely related. In addition to the call for the boycott, there's been a lot of news about the call to go in and steal from Loblaws stores. Now, I don't advocate theft, but I don't advocate theft by any party. Now, grocery stores, supermarkets refer to shoplifting. They call it inventory shrink. Well, there's another relevant term that contains shrink, shrinkflation. I'd like to raise a particular example. Carton of juice, store brand, Loblaws store brand, whether it be No Name or President's Choice, a carton of juice has always been 1.89 liters. It's because it's a 2-quart carton from the States. Suddenly, they're 1.75 liters. That's about 2/3 of a cup less. The price has not gone down, it's gone up. Well, I don't really see how that's any different from the old-time butcher sticking his thumb on the scale and charging me the same or more money for less meat. That is, I have an easy time seeing that as theft from me. And so while I don't advocate going in and shoplifting, I think it's very understandable why that call would arise. I think people can and reasonably do see shrinkflation as theft. And when zillionaire Galen Weston goes up there and says, gosh, the margins are so thin and we can't cut them any lower and it's not our fault. While Loblaw reports billion-dollar profits, I have to think, if he were serious, he says, well, we're committed to affordability.
Right.
Great. I would feel less wronged if they would make the carton smaller.
Okay.
If they want to make my grocery bill more affordable, make the carton smaller and charge less for it. Don't take it out of the carton. And I mean, that's theft.
Daniel, and there has been grocery code of conduct, right? Because the federal government has been looking into this with its parliamentary committee, and so they've come up with this grocery code of conduct, requiring or asking companies to participate. Do you think that might be successful or productive?
I do. I think looking at other countries that have gone that direction, Australia, for example, I think, just on the face of it, if Galen Weston and Loblaws objects to it this strenuously, I think there's got to be some promise to it. It's sort of like every time a regulation on cigarettes is proposed and the tobacco says, oh, no, you can't do that. It won't work. It's a bad idea. It's misguided. Don't do it. Well, that's because it works. And I think this is just like that. I think now, of course, it has to have teeth. If it's performative, if it's voluntary guidelines and squishy like that, then no, it's not going to do anything.
Okay. Daniel, great to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to clarify when it comes to the question of theft, and we had an email as well, the anti-theft policies or practices at its stores. In March, or a few months, in March, in recent weeks, Loblaw began testing receipt scanners at 4 of its locations. And so customers who go through self-checkout must use a device to scan their receipt's barcode, confirming that they paid something, and that opens up a metal gate, letting them leave. And there was some backlash to that. We have an email as well coming in, and another caller actually phoned in from Dudney, who was commenting about the previous email saying don't buy milk or fresh produce, and that angered her, and she said that's not the way to make a protest. She works 14 hours a day and has not been on vacation in years, and she said food producers are suffering. And John wrote us to say, I'm trying to think of another industry that protects their profits more guardedly than grocery stores and gas companies. Thank you so much for that. One last caller here before we wrap up. Kate is up next in North Vancouver. Hi, Kate.
Hi there. How are you?
I am fine. Thanks for calling. What do you make of this boycott of Loblaws?
Well, my perspective is as a small business who is doing business next to a large anchor tenant grocery store. And so in terms of the boycott personally, I wanted to call in actually as a small business owner and just say that when it comes to being their neighbor in a complex, they have all the rights. And small but independent business next door does not. To the point where it's almost like they are my landlord, because I have to run everything by the landlord in terms of how it would affect that company. Now, I've been shocked to walk in and find that they have my products on their shelves. When I signed the lease, I had to sign a restrictive covenant that said that I couldn't take the brands that they were selling. And I had no problem with that. But I walk in after a few years in business next to them, and I'm starting to see my products are being put on their shelves. And it's not in their category, let's just say. I don't want to out myself because I could get in trouble.
Okay. So I was going to ask you what the products are.
I really can't. I mean, let's just say they're more natural, they're more organic than you would normally find on this store shelf.
Right. And these are products you source or you make?
These are products that I source.
Okay.
And so when I had to sign the restrictive covenant, it would be contrary to my lease if I went in and I sold the same brands that they were selling. But it is not a reciprocal agreement. And expressing my concerns has met with basically just talking to a wall. It's what it feels like to me.
And who have you? Is it to the lease owner or?
Through the landlord.
The landlord,
They were to facilitate a meeting with myself and the store manager, but with the express, opinion that, listen, it's a big chain. You're not bound to make a difference. So I can't order in the same quantity they can. I can order by a box. They order by a pallet.
Kate, it sounds like a very specific situation, and I know you're not wanting to go into further detail, but what you're saying is there's an imbalance in the power structure when it comes to you dealing with this big company, Loblaws, and that's part of the conversation we've been having, which is how can smaller independent stores, although I don't think she's a grocery store, but how can smaller independent stores compete in this kind of landscape? Thank you so much for the call from North Vancouver. Thank you for all of your calls on grocery prices. You can email us, bctoday@cbc.ca, for more of your thoughts. It is 12:46, 1:46 in the Mountain Time Zone. Here with BC Today. Well, May is Asian Heritage Month, and we're going to hear more about that in just a few moments. And we have lots more emails coming in and on that topic as well, and we'll get to them tomorrow on the program. On Monday, we talked about moving from Edmonton, from Alberta to Vancouver, from BC to Alberta, rather, as we heard about an increase in people moving out of BC to other provinces in Canada, and Alberta seemed to be the one where people were moving to. And we got a lot of emails there. We're going to go to them at another point in the program. But right now, some more of your emails on short-term rentals, And Marjorie writes, in the grand scheme of things, restricting short-term rentals is not going to make a big difference against the lack of affordable housing. We need all hands on deck to get purpose-built rental housing. Restricting people from using secondary houses or properties as short-term rentals is a good thing. Jillian writes, I've used short-term rentals 10 to 12 times since moving to Victoria 4 years ago. Friends come to visit, so we rent a home, bike trips to Cheuk, music festivals in Comox, and trips to Mount Washington. We won't be doing that anymore as hotels are too expensive. Hillary writes, as a renter who's been subjected to living with an Airbnb that was open in the basement without our prior knowledge or approval, I applaud the government's change to the rules. I approve of anything that shifts our city properties priorities toward housing as homes first and not investments. Thank you again for all of your emails. And we are once again putting together emails on moving from BC to Alberta. We'll have that for you tomorrow on this show. Well, May is Asian Heritage Month. It's a chance to celebrate Asian Canadian communities. Now, someone who knows a lot about Chinese communities and how they've settled in Canada and around the world is my next guest. Now, Cheuk Kwan spent 4 years traveling the world, visiting Chinese restaurants, and collecting the stories and learning more about the people who actually opened those restaurants. And that has now become, that documentary series has now become a book as well. It's called Have You Eaten Yet? Stories from Chinese Restaurants Around the World. I'm delighted to have Cheuk Kwan with us here in studio. Hello.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. I actually have been watching kind of your career. I watched your documentary series, years ago. I just read your book, and I picked it up a few weeks ago and thought, oh, I'd love to have him on the show because it's fascinating to see, those family-run restaurants, the mom-and-pop restaurants we visit, and the stories behind them. Can you tell us more about why you wanted to learn more about that?
Well, I'm a card-carrying member of the Chinese diaspora myself. I was born in Hong Kong. I grew up in Singapore, then back to Hong Kong, and then I went on to Japan for high school, and then the States for universities. And then I immigrated here in 1976. So I'm kind of very typical kind of world traveling global citizen, if you were. And I felt that for a long time that I wanted to tell the story of the Chinese diaspora because that's not very well known. I mean, how many people know that there are 5 generations of Chinese in Madagascar?
Yes. Yeah. I think one episode you took us to Norway.
That's right.
I remember that. And it's so, it's just very heartwarming to see how, people flourish as well in such a different country, right?
Right.
And can you tell us about the struggles that Chinese people faced when they tried to settle and start these restaurants here in Canada?
Well, it all started out out of necessity. They started a restaurant because they were out of work.
Yeah.
After the CPR was built, they were let go and actually faced a lot of racism across Canada.
Yeah.
So one thing they could do was, well, we can make chop suey, and hence the origins of Chinese restaurants in Canada, for example.
And tell us about the history of chop suey, because it is really interesting.
Well, I rather not talk about it because I don't think that's a real Chinese food.
There it is.
It is something that people thought, okay, chop suey literally means odds and ends. So you go into the fridge and see what's left over, and you put it all together in the wok, and then stir fry it, and then you add in whatever the customers want, and then there you have it. So it's a very multiple, varietal kind of food that anybody can enjoy.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's so much, it's so reflective of, adapting.
It is.
And
it
surviving,
is.
right?
And that's the trait that I found across the world, where people had to adopt to, wherever they can make money, even to survive, actually. Like the Arctic Circle one, he had to adjust to the diet and appetites of Norwegians up there. So in that sense, there's a lot of innovation as well.
Do you have a favorite in Canada, a favorite restaurant and a favorite story?
I don't want to jeopardize my neutrality. I know I have a few in Vancouver as well.
Yes.
But,
we have a lot of really good, family stories here.
you can't go wrong in Vancouver going to a local family Chinese restaurant.
Absolutely. Okay, so not restaurant, but what's your favorite dish? Not chop suey, I guess.
No, my favorite dish used to be steamed fish, steamed whole fish with ginger scallion, the one that your mom used to make. But then after traveling the world, I discovered this dish that I've always known, but I kind of never had, pick on it. It was the Hakka mustard green pork belly.
Oh, wow.
It's a whole pork belly, and pork belly is the basis for bacon, and half of it is fat, the other half is meat. But it was so nourishing and so wonderfully tasteful when the Hakka people from China made it.
Yeah. My favorite, well, you can name any dim sum place in Vancouver, but my favorite dish is the xiaolong bao, those lovely, lovely dumplings that sup up all the soup.
Yeah.
What do you want people to think about when they go to a restaurant then? To a Chinese restaurant, and this applies to so many, diaspora restaurants, right? About the people who are behind the counter, who are hiding in the kitchen and kind of peeking behind, beyond. Yeah, what do you want to think about?
Well, that's precisely my my starting point when I made this film, because I always want to. I crave Chinese food when I travel in Turkey and whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And I always go into the restaurant and say, "Hey, I'm Chinese. I'm a fellow Chinese from Canada. Could you make me something authentic?" And of course, from that, people start telling their stories. I think you have to be curious to say, I'm not just eating at a regular restaurant. I'm eating in some, it could be Syrian refugee, it could be Iranian refugee, it doesn't matter. It's how they got there. They may not be chefs, but they certainly have a very interesting story to tell. And that's the story I was after in my film and in my book.
Yeah. And I recall you telling the story of people having to change their names to come here to Canada.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that was a bit of a language thing, but also because when they walk into the immigration, all they had was Chinese characters as the name. And the immigration would say, "Hey, I can't pronounce it. Why don't you say it to me?" And the difficulty is that, and then the problem is that people take the family name of Chinese, which always comes first, to be their first name, and the middle name to be their last name. So, their name got changed along the way.
Right. I learned so much. I've learned so much from your work. One thing I always wonder, I just have about a minute left here, but we always think about the next generation. Will they take up the torch? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, if they don't, then the parents are certainly not going to force them. That's because most Chinese restaurant owners, and I'm talking about family Chinese restaurant owners, I'm not talking about commercial, do not want their kids to suffer their own fate. Basically it's hard work, 12-hour, 15-hour day in the kitchen, and they do not want their kids to inherit that kind of career and profession. So, they become lawyers in Calgary, doctors in Toronto. Why bother trying to run a Chinese restaurant?
Well, it's good then that we have someone like yourself to chronicle their stories.
Yes, it is. It's a story that I think the generation is dying off in a sense. Although certainly there are a lot more new immigrants coming in that are taking up the torch. But I think the old kind of family Chinese restaurants that scatter, the Chinese cafes in the prairies, I think those are dying in a sense. I mean, there's fast food to compete with it and so forth. But I think the character is still there. You still find them.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing your stories
welcome.
with us. Great to have you. Cheuk Kwan is the author of Have You Eaten Yet? It's a question my mom used to ask all the time. Have you eaten yet? Stories from Chinese restaurants around the world. Really fascinating read. And thank you so much for all of your calls on our discussion around grocery prices as well. We would love to hear from you, and we can read your emails tomorrow on the program. And you can reach us at bctoday@cbc.ca. And you can also listen to the show once again. You can just use the CBC Listen app. You can also watch us once again on demand, and that's on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Just search for BC Today.